Hello everyone, welcome back to Be Like Christ. We are jumping into Judges 13 today in our 5-minute Bible study. You can get this PDF on our website for free. There's a link down in the description. Who are we going to be talking about in terms of our judges? Well, we've got one. We're going to be introduced to a very famous judge, maybe the most famous judge, and that is Samson. Yes, the strong guy with long hair. Hopefully you've already read a little bit about him if you read the chapter. Let's talk about our sections here. When did these events happen? The period of the judges fell somewhere between 1450 and 1000 BC. We're obviously moving towards the end of that period as we get to Samson. Still got some time left though. Where did these events happen? We're going to talk about a guy named Manoah and his wife. They lived in Zorah, a city in the territory of Dan. Let's talk about them a little bit more in our characters section. Manoah and his wife. His wife is never named. At least she's not named in this chapter. I don't think she's ever named. But Manoah and his wife were a married couple from the tribe of Dan. And then the angel of the Lord. This messenger was actually God himself. The text makes that clear. He appeared to Manoah and his wife and promised that they would have a son. And then finally, Samson. Samson is the baby boy born to Manoah and his wife. He had a special relationship to God. He was a Nazirite from the time of his birth, or actually even before his birth. His mother was supposed to keep the Nazirite vow in some ways. If you want to know more about the Nazirite vow, you can read about it in Numbers chapter 6. Now, over to page number 2. We'll talk about our sections that we've broken this chapter down into. Verses 1 through 5 is our first section. The angel of the Lord appears to Manoah's wife. So the Israelites, guess what they did? They turned away from God and they started doing evil things again. The cycle begins again. God allowed the Philistines to oppress them for 40 years. And in the town of Zorah, there lived a man named Manoah and his wife. His wife was barren and she couldn't have any children. She hadn't had any up to this point. The angel of the Lord appeared to her one day and told her that she would have a son. Her son was going to be special. As we mentioned, he was going to be a Nazirite. The woman was told to follow specific instructions during her pregnancy in order to honor this Nazirite vow that her son was going to be under. She was not allowed to drink wine or to eat any unclean animals. And by unclean, we mean the ceremonially unclean animals that were specified in the law of Moses, which you can read about like in the books of Leviticus. When the child was born, she also wasn't allowed to cut his hair. The angel of the Lord promised Manoah's wife that her son would save Israel from the Philistines. So now that Manoah's wife has received this promise, that brings us to section 2. The angel of the Lord appears to Manoah, verses 6 through 23. Now Manoah's wife ran to her husband, and she told him everything that the angel of the Lord said to her. Manoah prayed to God and asked him to send the angel again. He said, I want to hear about this as well. God answered Manoah's prayer, and the angel of the Lord appeared to Manoah and his wife in a field and repeated the instructions that he had given at his first appearance. The text tells us Manoah and his wife didn't know that the messenger was the angel of the Lord. And when Manoah asked the angel his name, he responded, quote, "Why do you ask my name, seeing it is wonderful?" Manoah took a goat and offered it to the Lord with fire. And then as the smoke of the offering went up to the sky, the angel of the Lord ascended to heaven in the smoke. And Manoah and his wife were obviously shaken by this. They were stunned and they fell on their faces to the ground. And Manoah was worried that they were going to die because they had seen God, right? This is part of the way we know that this was God himself. They were concerned that they had seen God. But Manoah's wife comforted him by reminding him that the Lord wouldn't have made them these promises if he intended to kill them. So here again in these sections, we see the appearance of this angel of the Lord. And we've talked about him several times in the book of Judges, in the book of Joshua. The best way to kind of ascertain the identity of this individual spoken about in the Bible, I think, is to read all of the accounts of his appearances. And I think when you do that, it seems like the majority of the time, if not all of the time, that this is actually a reference to God himself coming and delivering a message, maybe one of the individuals of the Trinity. And then finally, verses 24 through 25, the birth of Samson. So in time, Manoah's wife gave birth to a son, and they named him Samson. And, quote, "The Spirit of the Lord began to stir him as he grew older." And we'll see the Spirit of God falling on Samson several times during his life, enabling him to do some incredible things. But that's for the upcoming chapters. And now finally for our application section. In this chapter, God went to an obscure town in Israel to begin the process of saving Israel from the Philistines. Probably very few people knew about God's meeting with Manoah and his wife, maybe just like their friends who they told. Salvation wouldn't come to Israel for several years after this obscure meeting, because obviously Samson had to grow up to become the deliverer of Israel. So the application for us is this: just because you aren't aware of God working doesn't mean he isn't working. God may have put important building blocks of your life in place years ago. It may be the case that God set something in motion 15 years ago in an obscure town that will dramatically alter the course of your life or the course of the life of the people that are around you. God's plans are extraordinarily complex. He's at work in the life of every human being. He's manipulating billions of variables at every moment through time and space to bring people to himself and to order the creation according to his will.